Thank you guys so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in London.
Candace, what are your thoughts on a better story? You've been speaking a lot about this publicly. You've diagnosed a lot of the, let's call them, wrong stories. What's your idea of the right story?
You know, I always try to bridge the gap between things that are going on in the UK and things that are going on in America, and it's easier for me to do that, obviously, because my husband is from London, and I often ask him questions about what's going on here. And I think there's the expression that if America catches a sneeze, then the UK catches a cold. And so it's really important to pay attention to American politics, because what we have going over there, which is not a lot of good things at the moment, especially on university campuses, is what you're starting to see begin happening here in the UK. And it's very strange, because I've been speaking on university campuses for the last 7 years, and what's happening now, you know, the system of indoctrination and the questions that the children are starting to ask, the students rather, have nothing to do with hard academics at all. It's very focused on social engineering. You know, when I entered politics, obviously my focus was speaking on the topic of Black Americans, and obviously that's because of my experience living as a Black American and having a system that was very good at hiding its intentions, but still dripping poison into the minds of the youth, convincing me that because of the color of my skin, I couldn't make it in this country, and that virtually every societal ill that we were facing was due to some social justice issue that could be fixed if you just went out there and you rioted and protested and got angry. Really, it's setting people up ultimately to be failures, to believe that activism leads to some end where things are going to be changed. And I'll tell you, for Black Americans, if it took activism and protests to get ahead, we'd be there. We would be way ahead. We've had the civil rights movement. Obviously, you saw what happened with George Floyd, and the 2020 riots is what they were, and each time these things happen, it actually tremendously sets Black Americans back. Well, Black America actually offers a really good examination of where we are now, of what happens when you suspend rational thinking and dive into emotional thinking, when you believe that activism is a cure and you're not actually doing anything to understand your circumstances, to understand your own psychology, and to put yourself in a better position in life. And what I've learned about the Black American story, many of it thanks to doing a lot of reading of Dr. Thomas Sowell. If you're not familiar with him, I really invite you to read everything he writes. But what I've learned is that ultimately what's happened is the government, which wants to pursue ultimate government over our lives, has really destroyed 3 pillars that are very important. First, the pillar of faith. If atheism really swept the West, Judeo-Christian beliefs, it's almost hard to find a stronghold of that in America, despite the fact that we were built upon it. And then after you destroy the pillar of faith, the family. And that's really the spot that we're at right now when you think of all of these far left issues and you try to string together what it is that they all have in common. It's this intention to destroy the family unit, whether you're talking about this wild topic of transgenderism and getting children to mutilate their own bodies before they have a chance to start a family. If you're speaking about the rise of the LGBTQIA movement, not just people in the 90s who happened to be gay, but this becoming an entire identity and almost insisting that people be something other than heterosexual is really what it's about. Just pick any letter, but just don't be heterosexual, please. And you think about even the climate change narrative, which might seem unrelated, but when you dive into why they're putting someone like Greta Thunberg on the cover of magazines, it's because they're encouraging children to believe that starting a family is irresponsible for the planet. That's what I learned in a classroom, that the planet's not going to be here in 10 years, so why would you start a family? How could you be so selfish? Things of that nature. Anyways, all of this to say is that when you weave all that through, you realize that destroying the family pillar comes next, and then the death of the individual, which is to play the game of identity politics, to collectivize people, to say that this is how you must think because of the color of your skin. This is how you must think because you are gay. You must now be defending transgenderism. You're all collectivized, which creates that protest mindset. I have to now go out and defend this person. What's at the end of that? What's at the end of students that pursue that and young people that pursue that, believing that activism is a cure and activism is going to fix your life, and studying these obscure topics that you can now study? I mean, in America, a big one now is everyone's getting a degree in gender studies. I'm not sure what they're going to do with that degree when they get into the real world. And I try to tell them that on stage. If you are majoring in this, get out of school now, because no one's going to call you. Nobody needs a gender studies major to sort through anything in life. I've never once thought to myself, please get the gender studies major here, we have an emergency. And so I think what happens then is they get out into the real world, and then there's this bitterness and this anger because they did everything right. They listened to their teachers, they listened to their professors, they listened to the media, they did everything right, they got this degree, and nobody wants them. And that creates the ultimate activist, because that person is a failure. And Dr. Thomas Sowell has this quote, actually, that I just read last night in a book that I'm reading. And he says, you know, if given the alternative to choose between blaming yourself for your own failures or blaming others for their success, people always choose the latter. And that's what you're up against when you decide to do, right? You're going to have people that hate you, that are constantly making comments about you. The issue must be the fact that you succeeded, not that I failed. And that's the crisis that I think we're facing all around the world right now, is people that have failed in a large capacity and don't want to do the inner reflection, don't want to go through the changes necessary. And that is ultimately what you're up against. So what I'm saying is, don't just be an activist in the world. Please do not major in gender studies. And get out there and do something with your life if you want to make a real change.